Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
There are so many of us, as we age, we need support in some capacity. But we also have to take ownership over our own well-being and acknowledge that we live in a capitalistic churn and burn society that doesn't often allow for that.
You're listening to the Good Dirt Podcast. This is a place where we dig into the nitty-gritty of sustainable living through food, fashion, and lifestyle.
And we're your hosts, Mary and Emma Kingsley, the mother and daughter founder team of Lady Farmer. We're sowing seeds of slow living through our community platform, events, and online marketplace.
We started this podcast as a means to share the wealth of information and quality conversations that we're having in our world as we dream up and deliver ways for each of us to live into the new paradigm, one that is regenerative, balanced, and whole.
We want to put the microphone in front of the voices that need to be heard the most right now, the farmers, the dreamers, the designers, and the doers.
So come cultivate a better world with us. We're so glad you're here. Now, let's dig in.
Welcome to another Friday with the Good Dirt Podcast. I am Mary Kingsley, co-host of this weekly program with my daughter, Emma, and introducing today's episode, which goes live on March 8th, otherwise known as International Women's Day. So what is International Women's Day and how did it get started? Well, it's a global day celebrating the achievements of women and raising awareness for women's rights, women's empowerment, and gender equality. So the information on the exact origins of International Women's Day is somewhat conflicting. But one of the things that kept coming up as I was researching this was an event that took place in New York City on March 8th, 1857, when a group of women textile workers protested unequal pay and poor working conditions. I think that's a great reminder of the connection between the fashion industry and women's rights. And that here we are nearly 170 years later, and this is still an enormous social justice issue the world over. So that's one of the many reasons why we talk about slow fashion in the context of slow living here on the Good Dirt Podcast and at Lady Farmer, because as we state in the Lady Farmer Guide to Slow living is about paying attention to how we spend our time, money, and resources, and taking a step back from the industrialized systems that have come to provide our daily needs. And so paying attention is exactly what we're doing this week and over the next 2 weeks in the Slow Living Challenge, which is now underway. So if you're curious about that, you can go to the link in the show notes, which will take you to our new home in Substack. And there you can sign up for free and join us in this fun community event. We'll love to see you in there. Come on over. So International Women's Day and the Slow Living Challenge are all a great lead-in to today's episode, in which we welcome back Sharon Bailey from episode 36, who at that time ran Glow Emporium, a women's wellness, education, and empowerment community, helping women connect with their own feminine rhythms and living in sync with nature for a happier and healthier lifestyle. During that conversation, we talked about slow living as a fundamental necessity for coping with the many demands of women today.
Now, 3 years later, we are catching up with Sharon after some major life changes, including a move from her small town in Colorado and to her new desert home in Grand Junction, Colorado. Her new business venture, it's called Sharon Bailey Co., and you'll hear her talk about that, where she offers business support for practitioners in the healing arts. Sharon is an educator, mentor, coach, business owner, podcaster, program creator, artist, and a mom.
We really enjoyed circling back with Sharon as she so generously shares with us the challenges and the gifts of her journey since we last spoke. We also talk about her deep work with clients and helping them avoid burnout, and her insights on the interconnections of nature and our personal rhythms as a foundation of slow and regenerative living. So here's Sharon Bailey of Sharon Bailey Co.
I'm Sharon Bailey. I am the founder of Sharon Bailey Co., which in my previous interview, my business name used to be the Glow Emporium. It is now called Sharon Bailey Co. I'll tell you more about that, but just to give you a life update so that people can kind of get to know me a little bit better. So when last time we talked, I lived in a tiny little 3,000 person town in the mountains of Colorado called Paonia with my husband and our son Fox. Since then, I have gotten divorced and I have moved to Grand Junction. A number of other things have changed. I actually do feel like a vastly different human. I really don't feel like you can go through something like a divorce without changing yourself drastically. I actually was talking to somebody recently, like how divorce kind of feels like a really messed up rite of passage. I feel like I have finally made it through that rite of passage and I would like to not ever do it again. But I'm here in Grand Junction. My son still lives with his dad in Paonia to go to the Waldorf school there. And then he comes to hang out with me on the weekends. And I've just been building a little life for myself here. And it's been so lovely. I've changed my business to really focusing in on coaching and mentoring humans in the healing arts. And now I am also going back to school with the idea that I will become a physical therapist. So that's where I'm at now.
That's awesome. I know personally from following you that a lot of your personal transformation has to do with physical, basically fitness and all of that. So is that where the physical therapy piece comes in?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, movement as medicine. When I went through my divorce, I am no stranger to grief. Is something that I really came to terms with during my divorce. And when I went through my divorce, I was adamant about not using numbing mechanisms that I've used in the past through previous grief trauma experiences. And I've always been a physically active person. Like I'm a certified yoga instructor. I have always, I used to climb, all these, I've been physically active, but when I was in Paonia, I ended up being rather sedentary for a lot of various reasons. Even though we were like amateur homesteaders and I was always running around chasing a baby, or a toddler, my body changed really drastically. I actually gained a ton of weight when I was in my 30s and my body just really hurt. And there was all these like aches and pains. And I was trying to do all these things with nutrition. So I learned a ton about nutrition, meditation, yada, yada, all the things, right? But when I went through the middle T trauma of the divorce that I went through, I really turned to strength training to deal with my anxiety. I would often just feel like a caged tiger just pacing around my living room. And so I would run to the gym, go lift weights, run home, work, see clients, pull myself together, see my clients. And then another bout of anxiety would come up. So I would just go do it again. And I used movement as medicine so hard. I ended up losing like 65 pounds in just a few month period of time. That's actually happened. It's really fascinating. It actually happened right in my early 20s. My mom passed away. And in that amount of time, I used movement as medicine as well. And I did the same thing. It was like all this weight just like went off my body. So I feel like it's not a measurable correlation, but if I were to make it, it would be like, there is a connection between my mental health, my physical movement, and my body's way of showing that I am stable or unstable. And that's through, fat. Really. And so in all of this, I started strength training really heavily. I got really, really excited about it, especially as I started to stabilize. And then I started really digging into the benefits of strength training. One of my things that I'm really fascinated about right now is that the benefits of strength training in perimenopause and menopause. And as you know, and as I probably talked about a lot in my previous interview, I'm really, really into the menstrual cycle and the hormonal rhythm. And so now that my own hormonal rhythm is changing, I'm really fascinated by the impacts of strength training, movement, moderate, high intensity exercises, the benefits that those things have on the perimenopausal and menopausal cycle.
I love hearing this. I love the term movement as medicine. I don't think I've ever really heard that before, but it's so descriptive and so helpful. And you're talking about grief. You're talking about life change, hormonal change, all this transformation. And yes, we feel anxious. We feel restless. There's like nothing to do with it, perhaps, except substances or movement or, of course there's meditation and there are all kinds of things, but I just love that idea of movement as medicine, movement as a tool through these emotionally trying times. And you were talking about the advantages of strength training in the menopausal phase. And here I am well past all that, but I am learning myself right now in my own phase of life of the importance of strength training for bone density. And those problems often start right where you are when, the body starts losing bone density. And I'm a real novice at it. I mean, anything I say on here is information that anybody can get just from the usual sources of information. But yeah, we have to start paying it as women. It's important for us to start paying attention to that issue of bone density loss right where you are in the hormonal changes. And also now studies are showing that cortisol and stress and all that contributes greatly to bone loss. Here, Emma and I are representing two very different phases of life, but this is really relevant to both of us.
I mean, I think that that's what I really like to look at movement as like preventative medicine. It's just like nutrition, just like regulating the nervous system, through things like yoga, meditation, walking. And again, like all of that is still linked to movement. And like even meditation, like the westernized version of yoga that's like asana is really to prime the body for the meditative state. So doing the exercise prepares the body and mind to get into a meditative state, right? And so again, it goes back to the movement as one of the most potent forms of medicine that we can use.
Oh, wow. Yes. And something else I've learned recently in my experience with my mother suffering from advanced dementia. And of course, at my age, I'm thinking, gosh, how can I prevent this? I mean, this is my mom. I don't know if I carry this genetically or what, but studies are now showing that movement is a very, very important tool in helping to prevent dementia. I can't say, will it keep you from getting it? Or they don't really know the exact causes of dementia and Alzheimer's. I think it is, a combination of factors, a lot of unknown things. I mean, what are we dealing with in our environment, our food system that is contributing to this almost epidemic proportion problem? But they are now stressing movement. So all this is really resonating with me very, very strongly.
So going back to your choice to pursue physical therapy, did you say you're getting a PhD?
Well, it's a doctorate in physical therapy. So my BFA is over, I graduated 12 years ago. So I have to essentially go back and get an associate's degree worth of prerequisites before I can even apply to be in the program. Yeah. So that's the process I'm in right now, is just like working on all of the prereqs. Yeah. But it's really cool because there's a university 6 blocks from my house that just started a DPT program, and that's where I'm going. So it's like so nice to just be able to walk to school.
Yeah. I'm really interested to hear your choice to go pursue the doctorate in physical therapy, because just knowing who you are and what you've worked in, I could see, so you work with healers, you're a coach for coaches, and I could see you sort of just adding that physical element to your coaching in a way. And just, that sort of seems like, I would guess that's something that you would do. But like the physical therapy side of it is, to me, that's kind of a different thing. Maybe that is movement as medicine, literally, because people go to physical therapy to really truly heal from something. And I don't know, I'm curious in your thought process of pursuing that avenue of it instead of just like adding physical coaching to your offerings.
Yeah. Okay. So the evolution of the whole situation is like, I used to be a business coach for artists, for people in the fine arts, because that's my background. And then I started getting people in the healing arts coming to me and being like, can you help me? And I'm like, sure. And I've always had, as a birth doula and a childbirth educator and yoga teacher and all this stuff, I've kind of had my toes dipped in to the healing arts as my own practitioner self. But because of a number of different limitations, I've never really dived into my own pursuit of becoming a practitioner. I've always kind of had it in the back of my mind, like, I really want to go to grad school, or I really want to do some like upper level education, where I can help people in some capacity. And in fact, the reason I went to art school was to become an art therapist. So when I started working with healers as a business coach and mentor, I just fell in love with that population. And I was like, oh, these are my people. Like when I was in art school, I was living with 3 acupuncture students, and I was like the guinea pig for every acupuncture treatment you could possibly. Yeah, it's great. And then when I left Austin, we moved as a unit of 9 people, and 3 of them were acupuncturists. And so like, I just, it's like, that's the world that I've just been immersed in, it's like the healing arts. So anyway, so I started working with this population, and actually very recently, and I always like with my clients and checking in on how's your nutrition? How's your movement practice? How's your sleep? Like these all impact business. They all impact our life. I really like to help people build a business with a regenerative mind frame. And so that is movement. That is mental health. It's emotional health. It's well-being. It's all of those things, right? You can't run a business on empty. And sometimes I have my clients come to me and it's like, yeah, they need to talk about systems, but I say like I do systems and soul work. Like we primarily do the soul work part, where it's like people will come in and they'll talk about what they need to talk about. And they're like, oh man, that was none of the things I wanted to get to today. I was like, well, the stuff on your to-do list seems a lot more attainable now, right? And they're like, yes, actually it does. So the connection of the like mental, physical, emotional well-being and business go hand in hand. And recently I was visiting a client of mine. She was actually doing her practice on me, and she's an orthobionomist. And we were actually trying to come up with some wording for what she does. And I was like, well, why don't I, pay you for a session? That way I can experience it. And then we can talk about, wording, right? Copy, languaging. And while we were in there, she was like, Sharon, you have one of the strongest life forces I've ever experienced. She's like, why aren't you a healer? And I was like, oh, and I really kind of sat with that for like, this was back in the fall. And I really sat with it, and I've just been sitting with it and sitting with it and sitting with it. And I've been in this big life transition, right? And I finally feel really grounded. And a few weeks ago, it really just hit me like a ton of bricks. I've started working with this physical therapist, like helping her implement business systems. And I've just been loving the work that she does, and like reading her Google reviews of people who are just like, this has changed my life. I've been to a lot of physical therapists, and she has changed my life over and over and over again. And I was like, this, I feel like, is the union of all the things that I really want to do. I started looking at like, how can I tie these things together? And I don't want to, because I'm moving towards menopause. By the time I have this doctorate and I'm establishing my practice, I'm very aware that I'm going to be deep into perimenopause by that point, because I'm 41. I just turned 41 this week. And I am going to probably be 46, maybe 47 when I'm establishing this practice. So I'm not going to be in a space like a practitioner who's just coming out of their doctorate at 30, who can go full blast and see 25 people at a time. And so I'm really trying to say like, okay, how can I, knowing my body so well, knowing what is potentially on the horizon, although you never really know what menopause is going to be like, but knowing like, my cycle has gotten shorter, my energy has gotten lower, my brain fog has gotten higher, all of these aspects of self going into a second career. What can I do to not burn myself out when I'm in that phase? And so what I'd really like to do is continue to business coach healers while becoming one myself, so I can balance my practice by doing part-time coaching and part-time physical therapy, but bringing the two together, and whatever that is. I know that I'll get a lot more information on what it is that I'm moving towards like doing in my practice, but as I go through, this whole program and this experience. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the idea, is that they're so interconnected, and running my own healing practice will also help me coach healers. So they just seem so perfectly, fit together.
I would love to hear you talk more about the idea of regenerative business and regenerative practicing, and especially as, you've worked with healers and now you are training to be a healer, and how you'll bring that, into your own training and your own experience. Because as I'm sure the conventional training for our healers in our health system might not be called regenerative. I mean, we've all known people that have been to med school and nursing school that are just worn to a pulp from their training. They're training to heal people. And this sort of seems like a sort of a contradictory thing in our society and our health system. So I'd love to hear you speak about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I have this client right now. She is a retired nurse and she was a hospice nurse for 40 years. And now she is doing what's called nurse coaching, which is like well-being coaching as a nurse for healthcare practitioners to help battle what's called compassion fatigue, because the healthcare provider system is just so churn and burn that these doctors, nurses, all of them are so prone to burnout and to be so worn out that they are fatigued in their compassion. And I've really been learning a lot about the healthcare system from her. And I don't usually tend to work with doctors, nurses, et cetera, as a coach. Like, it's more people who are running their own business. So I do end up with like PTs because they're in a really interesting kind of sphere of people who like are doctors, but they run their own practice often. But I work with chiropractors and acupuncturists and naturopaths. And I mean, it spans the gamut, right? And the really interesting thing is, unless a practitioner has gone through a program, and because we work from a business perspective, that's kind of more where I'm going to address, unless a practitioner has a business focus in their training, then the two things together are just almost undeniably a recipe for burnout. Trying to run a business, like I heard it on the other day. I was listening to some like PT business podcast, and he was like, referencing an interview with a veterinarian who was like, I may be a veterinarian, but I'm actually a business owner that just happens to be a veterinarian. Like I just happen to be a doctor. And there's such like an interesting thing that most healers, even those who have a business background, really struggle to run a business from the like capitalistic business perspective of our society. And a lot of people, they're like, I just want to help people. But in order to do that, in order to run a practice, they have to make money, because money is energy. It's an exchange that goes in and out. If they're giving everything, then they're going to burn out. It's not regenerative. So I really try to teach them to look at currency as energy, right? Everything you're putting out, you need to be bringing something back in to nurture and nourish the soil of yourself. And I really try to get them to look at their whole life as an ecosystem. In fact, some of my clients, I get them to draw it out. I'm like, draw out your life ecosystem. Where do we need to amend soil? What needs to be composted? Like, what do we need to say no to? And sometimes composting is literally raising your prices, because like you need to amend the soil with that. And you've got to like let go of these funny money things. Most healers that I interact with have this like martyr syndrome. And I'm like, you're a healer, not a martyr. Okay. I don't know if it's past life. I don't know if it's just who they are. I don't know, like it depends on how woo you want to get, but like it's something that's so baked into people that it's like, it's a big part of the regenerative business conversation. But really, it's like all of the factors play in. Like, there's nothing off the table when I have a client come talk to me that we can't discuss. If it is marriage stuff, I mean, obviously I'm not a therapist, so it's like, okay, if we get to a place where I'm like, this is out of my scope, but if you just need somebody to listen to you, like I'm here for that. If it's, emotional stuff, if it's whatever, like we get into all of it because all of it plays into this ecosystem of life and business. And sometimes you have to go through heavy times of like working hard. I mean, it's the same thing as like gardening. Yeah, there's times where you got to get out there and like go to town and like dig up weeds. You got to amend your soil. You've got to like go harvest. I mean, can we just talk about harvest season? How much work that is? We used to grow a garden and we were, putting food away all fall. it was exhausting. Like sometimes I'd be up in the kitchen until 1 p.m, like canning green beans or whatever. So like there are times where it's like, whether it's abundance of clients, it's abundance of income, it's abundance of paperwork, like you got to push through, but it's like, you also got to know what needs to be composted at that time. Right. And there's like that right there is like, what do you say no to? And then taking into account, what does your body need right now? If you have a menstrual cycle, like, are you about to are you about to bleed? Are you about to be on your moon time? Like, okay, maybe you don't need to do the dishes, right? Like maybe you don't need to do all these extra things and be the like, do it all kind of person. Like maybe you just need to like calm it down, give yourself a few days and then like dive back into the flow. So it's like looking at the cyclical flow of what goes out needs to have something that nourishes you to coming back in. Otherwise, you get depleted so quickly.
It's so true. Everything you're saying is so true. Oh my gosh.
And our last conversation with you 3 years ago, we talked a lot about that cyclical rhythm where women are operating on a different cycle.
Literal hormonal cycle.
Yes, than the system, the capitalistic system that everybody is.
Because men's hormonal cycle, I learned this in the last time we talked, men's hormonal cycles is on a 24-hour cycle.
That's correct.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit, how that plays into your work with your clients and your own approach to your continuing education how would you describe that? That it's
through like the allopathic medicine channel,
yes.
It's the doctors. Yeah. Well, so it's really interesting. And if people go back and listen to it or not, like what I really want to do is encourage anybody who is menstruating or not to like track your rhythm. But especially if you're a menstruating human, like to please start tracking your rhythm, because what is fascinating now. I mean, I think I'm like 6 or 7 years into tracking my menstrual cycle because I'm pretty sure I started right after I got my period back after I had my baby. So now that I am perimenopausal, I don't know that I would have fallen into that category had I not. And I don't want to categorize myself. It's just helping me understand. It's helping me understand the changes that I feel so that I don't have guilt around them. Why am I so tired right now? Why is my brain not functioning the way it was recently? And it's like my cycle has gone from being, I think it was like 28 or 29 days to 24 in the past 3 years. And so knowing that information about myself, and part of that probably has to do with the stress and strain that I went through in my divorce, but there's just big shifts happening. And so I can see now I've got, 7 years of data on myself to be able to apply that to my own schooling, my practice, my being a single parent, like being in a new partnership, like every aspect of my life, I can utilize that information and especially exercise. I mean, please, like I train based off of my hormonal cycle. Like, so I'm going to start in the next 2 days and today trying to get myself to the gym. I think I did talk about it in my Instagram stories. I was like, the gym feels like it's 50,000 miles away from me. And I know that I can't lift weights nearly as heavy as I can when I am in my follicular phase, because I literally do not have the hormones that I need to support the muscle strength, stability, etc. And I also don't build muscle mass as much in this phase as I do in my follicular phase. So why would I push myself, create guilt, create strain, possibly hurt myself if I know that this brilliant machine that I'm driving here doesn't have the fuel that it will in a week, that it does right now? It's like, well, then I can eliminate being extra tired, like pushing, like if I were to go in today and have done like a high intensity workout, I would have wiped myself out for the entire day. That would have been my whole energy reserve. And it's like, I know what I have to do on my to-do list. So I'm not going to train that way. I'm also not going to go to hot yoga tonight, which is like usually my Thursday thing, because I know I'm about to start bleeding. So I want to take care of that. So, I mean, that's one of the ways that I really want to implement the hormonal rhythm and like nutrition. I mean, what I'd love to do is once I become a physical therapist, also go in and do a nutrition training so that I can combine them because they all go together. But really, it's like looking at the body as this brilliant machine. And it's like, if you're driving, it's the most incredible machine we'll ever get to drive. You know, if you're driving a machine and it doesn't have the right fuel for the way that it works, then we can't get mad at the machine for that. It's like, we got to like give it the fuel that it needs or give it the brake that it needs, right? Our body isn't trying to work against us. It's trying to communicate constantly. It's constantly, that's what sensations are, right? Like, it's a constant effort on our body's part to communicate with us what it needs. And it's really our job to decipher what that is. And that takes a lot of work, you know? So most people don't put in the effort and they just blame the body. And yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios where the body is, I mean, I don't want to say this. I'm just thinking of my partner because he's got a thing and it's like, it feels like it's glitching, you know? And it's like, okay, how can you be supportive of that? Right. But I think it's really about trying to bridge, like you were saying, Mary, the like allopathic world with the naturopathic world. And that's why I love physical therapy, because I think it does that. It's like, how can we use movement as medicine? How can we learn about the body and the messaging it's trying to share with us, and then fine tune it so that it is in working order as we age, you know, and as our hormones shift and like we move into perimenopause. And, you know, I mean, I'd love to get into like teaching perimenopausal women how to use movement as medicine to improve their quality of life through those life transitions and into older age.
So what about when you no longer have a cycle?
Yeah, I was just going to ask that. How do you know about the hormonal cycles of like menopausal? Like, how does that change?
Well, so I'm just learning, and I'm sure there's people listening who will be like, it's this kind of estrogen. But basically, it's like, okay, your body doesn't have any more eggs. Like, it's used its cache of eggs, right? And so then it doesn't, I mean, and again, I'm still learning. So somebody fact check me on this. But essentially, like, I think your body just kind of stops producing a certain form of estrogen because it's not needed, because you don't need a menstrual cycle anymore. And I can't remember the type of estrogen. Is it estradiol? Somebody fact check me on this. I'll learn. That's why I'm going to school.
Yeah. We'll have you back in 3 years.
Have me back in 3 years. I'll be able to like, I'll be in my DPT program at that point and be able to like give you the deep. I mean, that's kind of my thing, is that like I learn as I go, right? Mm-hmm. So like when I had a baby, that's when I learned how to be a doula and a childbirth educator. Yeah. Now that I'm going through this, I'm like, oh, this is fascinating. Tell me more, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, when you start experiencing bone loss, you read about it and you learn that, after menopause, your body stops producing some kind of estrogen.
But there still must be some cycle.
I don't know. I'm sure there's something, but in terms of like living, you know, I live very closely into the cycles of the earth, you know, in the seasons. And I am also aware of emotional cycles of my life. And I'm sure there's hormonal stuff behind that. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But
well, and I mean, yeah, you have your own rhythms, right? You can tap into the moon. I think that that's when it really gets more into the like, and this is a really interesting question that I want to look into, because I know like when you have a hormonal, like when you have a menstrual cycle, then it's called a circadian rhythm, but with the hormonal cycle on top of it, because the circadian rhythm is more, to the best of my understanding, is based in the male hormonal cycle, right? The ebb and flow of every day. You know, you're writing kind of the highs and lows of every day, right? But when you look at the female menstruating hormonal cycle, it's the rise and fall every day of that, plus the rise and fall over the month period of time of the ebb and flow of estrogen, progesterone, etc. Because what's happening is they're doing all these things to like get the egg prepared, push it out, have it, go down into the uterus, doesn't implant, uterus sheds, do it all over again. So it's like this beautiful symphony of hormones and, chemicals working together to try to procreate. But when you don't have the ability to procreate anymore, then you don't need those chemicals and hormones working together. So then the body doesn't really need to go through that whole process, right? So I don't actually know what happens. Then do you switch into a circadian rhythm at that point, where then you're just riding the waves of your energy rises in the morning, because that's like what our bodies are meant to do, and then slowly descends throughout the day, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that that's probably, to the best of my knowledge, again, I'll know more in 3 years. We'll talk then. But that's, I think, what really ends up happening. But you don't get that like super boost of estrogen at the beginning of your cycle like you're used to. And so I think it can be a real crash landing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think one important thing to recognize in all of this is that it's important to our own like physical and emotional health to pay attention to how we feel and the ebbs and flows of energy and mood and all of this sort of thing, and respect it and honor it. Like for me, I'm not sure what the ebbs and flows of the hormones are, but I can listen to myself and I can listen to my own rhythms that I'm experiencing for whatever reason and honor it. And if I feel like resting, or if I feel not very productive, or if I feel like this is the afternoon, I'm going to do all these projects and I feel like it, go for it. But if I don't, I can honor that. And it's easy for me to say, I work from home. I don't have kids. My responsibilities outside of myself are fairly limited. So it's easy for me to say. And a lot of people out there, their daily schedule is preset and dictated by jobs, kids, schedules, all this sort of thing. It never hurts to at least begin the process of tuning in and becoming aware of our own rhythms and bodies and energy cycles.
Yeah, I think that's a big part too of, for instance, we're about to go into the Slow Living Challenge when this comes out. We'll probably be a few weeks on the other side of it. And so we're preparing all of our prompts, our daily prompts, and what we're thinking about. And a lot actually of what we talk about in the Slow Living Challenge is like, pay attention to how you're feeling. How are you feeling right now? And it's a lot of feelings. That's kind of a different aspect from it's. We talk about sustainability and we talk about sourcing your food and sourcing your materials for daily life. But I think sometimes we forget about the feeling of all of that. And I think that what's an interesting connection is as you tune into how you're feeling in your own cycles and rhythms, it's actually that can be sort of an entry point into sustainability, because sustainability, as you talk about too, Sharon, I'd love to go here too with like preventing burnout and regenerative living basically is, how else are we going to get there if we don't know how we operate and we don't know how we feel?
Totally. Well, I think it's Adam Grant that talks about this. Do y'all know who he is?
I don't.
An industrial organizational psychologist. Oh, he's one of my favorites. I'm reading his book right now called Hidden Potential. It's outstanding. If you're not passionate about something, it's going to be so much harder to do. And so it's like the fact that y'all are talking about the systems, like again, it's like systems versus soul work, right? It's like systems are actually so much easier when the emotional side of it is in alignment. If you're feeling connected to what you're doing, then it's like, yeah, the systems are just, the step-by-step process, right? It's just a habit that you build on. And you can adjust and change as you need to, as you put it into place. But it's like, if you're not into it, then it's going to seem exhausting. Then you've set this goal for yourself and you have essentially set yourself up to fail or burn out because you're not passionate about it. And then that just leads to guilt. And then maybe you're not going to try it again. They're so all like intrinsically linked, right? So when you know about your physical self and how it impacts your abilities, when you're passionate about what you're doing and you have a purpose behind it, and then you know how to go about doing it, how to at least start. Like in Adam Grant's book, Hidden Potential, he talks about when you're learning how to do something, you start doing it on the first day. You don't learn how to do it because you learn how to do it, and then because you learn how to do it by doing it. And like unlocking hidden potential is not about the pursuit of perfection. Tolerating flaws isn't just something that novices do. It's part of becoming an expert and continuing to gain mastery. And like when you are trying something new, or like integrating something like slow living or like regenerative, like living in a regenerative perspective, knowing why based off of, and maybe you don't know, maybe it is just a feeling, right? But like feeling into the why and then knowing what you're capable of is going to fuel the fire for you to put those habits into place and to create the systems and then to make it a lifestyle. And
then also being okay with the systems, like not maybe being linear or something. Like that's been a big part for me too. Like, and this is going back to the basics of what we've talked about with the cycle. Like, why is it some weeks I feel like I can't get anything done. And then other weeks I do a full month's of work in 1 week. And sure, okay, there's that. But then it's like how I feel about that is a whole thing. It's a whole like thing to get over. And that's another part of the system we're a part of, to where it's like, well, we should be, doing 40 hours of work a week, like perfectly evenly across all weeks.
You said the should. That's the thing. Is it really like when you know about what your rhythms, or you at least have an idea of them, you can eliminate the shoulds so much more easily. And that is like one of the biggest unintentional outcomes of me tracking my menstrual cycle and implementing that into my business practice and then teaching my clients about it. I mean, I get people every time now I get a client on the phone who is a menstruator, they're like, the first thing they do is tell me what part of their cycle they're in. I don't even ask. They're just trained that way now, but it's like when you know, and I can tell you the answer to like, why is it I can get a month's worth of work done in 1 week and then 3 weeks I can't, it's estrogen. But it's like, again, when you've got this beautifully functioning, really intricate machine that we're driving around, and it's like, this week it's working really well. So everything's going smoothly. And, now this week it's not. And like, what the heck is going on?
The crappy part is we tie our self-worth to that too. We're like, we feel great about ourselves during that week. So silly.
Absolutely. Well, it's because, again, it goes back to, living in a world that was designed by men for men. And I've really done so much work on healing my relationship to the masculine. So when I say that, it's no shame or whatever on men. And I just want to say that, but it is our reality. And what it does to women in particular and to, non-men in particular is it creates this extra layer of shame and blame when we can't produce the way that our counterparts do, because it's not that we're not capable. We're just living in a system that's not created for our rhythms.
We're on a different timeline.
Big time.
Yeah. And earlier we were talking about your work with healers, and you were saying how you've noticed that healers have their own workflow and rhythm. And I think that'd be interesting to hear about as well.
Yeah. It's difficult to talk a group of people who just want to help people into all the rest of the stuff. Unfortunately, running a healing arts business isn't just healing. It's all the rest of the stuff. It's taxes. It's like admin day and scheduling and paperwork and even actually like, menstruators versus non-menstruators, like showing up for your clients or patients the same way every day. Like it's a lot physical energy to put out into a person and care for them, to receive everything they are telling you, but without taking it on and taking it home, is a ton of work for healers. Then there's balancing the whole like financial aspect on top of it, where it's icky conversation. Because in allopathic medicine, I think the idea is like patient in, patient out, patient in, patient out, the churn and burn through the system. So part of it, and a lot of people have been trained that they need to just go in, the doctor's going to fix the problem, and they're just going to leave. That's very linear, like you were talking about, where it's like most of the practitioners I work with are more on a cyclical nature of like, they want to do the part that they can to help, but they also want to teach people to help themselves. And so then that also requires a lot of emotional, energetic, physical buy-in from the clients that are coming to see them. And they're having to ask for payment in return. So they get this weird feeling where they're like, oh, I can't. It feels salesy. They're super uncomfortable about it. And instead of getting, and that's a lot of what I help people work through, but it's like, instead of like getting through that, they'd rather just like give away their services, and then they burn out, and then they have to go get a job, and then nobody's getting healed. And I'm just like, look, if you don't ask for payment, because that's our energy pool for our society, then you're going to burn out. Nobody's getting healed.
So in terms of creating a new paradigm, which we love to talk about, and dealing with the systems that we have in place, where do we go from here with personal healing and healers and regenerative living, regenerative business? What do you think is the bigger picture here?
Well, one of the things that comes to mind is like teaching the average person that, this is like my field in particular, but teaching the average person that when you go to seek out a healing practitioner, that recognizing that they're a person, they're a human being on the other end, and they want to help you. And they may have a hard time asking you for money. They may not, like it depends on their business systems. And that you also, it really is your responsibility to learn about this brilliant machine you're driving around and to learn about it through curious eyes as opposed to like eyes with a shame filter where it's like, I'm not sitting here judging my body, which is, can we talk about how like we have been conditioned since day one to be judging our bodies. So it's a lot of unlearning, but it's like, how can I start this process looking at it through a creative lens of what is my body telling me? What do I need to know? If I need help, which at this point in our lives, like we all do, I can't even tell you how many people would have like going to PT school have responded with, oh, I just recently had physical therapy and I left my physical therapist. It's great. We need more physical therapists, or like, I love my acupuncturist or whatever. It's like there are so many of us as we age, we need support in some capacity, but we also have to take ownership over our own well-being and acknowledge that we live in a capitalistic churn and burn society that doesn't often allow for that. And so it can feel like a push and pull if we're trying to like push to create more space in our life for healing, let's say. And so again, it's like going back to eliminating shame. It feels so cyclical. It's a whole ecosystem. So it's not just like you don't just have the pond or the field or the garden or whatever, it's like they all play together. And so I think it's really just kind of like stepping back and looking at the bigger picture. If we're looking at our body, what is our body trying to tell us? If our business isn't functioning, what is our business trying to tell us? What we're putting out into the world isn't functioning. Like what is that trying to tell us? Like how can we adjust without shame and blame of ourselves? Because there's so many factors that we're unaware of that are creating that. And as we layer that on top of ourselves, that's basically like throwing salt on a garden, it's not doing anybody any good. It's just going to make everything wither. And again, I just want to say this. If you recognize yourself saying I should or feeling blame, don't shame yourself for that. Acknowledge that it's something that you have been conditioned to do. And instead, how can you turn your inner narrative into something that's like, I hear what I'm saying and I love myself. What do I need to do next? What's the next step I need to take? I am a novice. I'm going to just aim for imperfection, learn what I can, and grow from there.
I love that. It's also making me think of something I saw probably on Instagram earlier today about self-improve. It was a really sweet poem someone wrote about for Lent, maybe giving up the pursuit of like self-improvement and just sort of relishing in the before photo. Frame the before photo and just like be there for 40 days and don't try to fix it. And I love kind of what you're saying about, I think we conflate self-improvement and healing. And I think that we need to keep them in different places, because if something needs healing and something is not functioning, we need to care for it compassionately and we need to seek out help. But I think sometimes we treat things that are actually okay as if they need to be fixed or something, and they don't. So there's kind of a lot of things going on there. But when you were speaking about those things, it reminded me of that it's also part of slowing down and being in the present and being in touch with your feelings and how you feel and how things are working. That is just as much a part of the process as the healing part, because we can't grow or live if we don't know the next best thing to do.
Right. And sometimes like the next best thing is like, you don't know. It's just sitting and observing. Honestly, when I knew that I needed to make a huge change in my life was when I realized I didn't remember what brought me joy anymore. And joy is the most nourishing thing for, the soil of our lives. Like if we don't have joy to put into ourselves in whatever that looks like, then we're just, I don't feel like we're really living. We're just existing,
And I also want to speak to what you were saying a few minutes ago about, what's the next step about zooming out. And I feel like we discuss on here so much about, connecting with the earth and connecting with nature and the rhythms. And here we've been talking about our inner rhythms and how our inner rhythms reflect the outer rhythms as well, or how they sync up with them sometimes or appreciating how they do or how they don't, but appreciating that our bodies are reflective of the earth, that not only are we connected to nature, as you hear that language where humans are connected to nature. No, humans are nature. We are the earth in another shape or form, but we are the earth. We are good dirt. And ashes to ashes, dust to dust, we will be in the earth one day. So the more we can appreciate that and connect our intellect to that idea, maybe that's the zooming out. Maybe that's the practice in facilitating our own healing and shifting the paradigm of our societal health care and how, as you said, take responsibility for it. Of course, we do have to outsource a lot of it because people are trained and people have knowledge and they know what to do for these things. But there's a lot we can do for ourselves in our own understanding.
Yeah. I mean, so much of what I share is self-taught. And so just the idea of like taking ownership over and responsibility for ourselves, like there's so much we can learn out there. I'm actually I'm going to start a new like Instagram series and email list. I've been kind of thinking about this of just stuff I learned this week because I'm so fascinated by everything I'm learning. I'm like, I just want to share this, because I think there's so much for us to learn in the world. And it's really nice to learn and share knowledge with people I care about.
So currently at this point in your life, Sharon, what does slow living mean to you?
Okay. So recently my life has become very full because I was in a place where I eliminated everything. Like I changed everything. And then I just sat in what I was creating after, essentially like I had a death of myself and a rebirth. And I have recently started saying yes to things. And very quickly, my life got very full. And one of the things the mantras that I keep coming back to is the magic is the mundane in the mundane. And so just the day-to-day ebb and flow of the mundane is where the magic really starts percolating. And that instead of saying I'm really busy, I really try to say my life is full of things I love. And some of them are difficult, like going back to school as a 41-year-old single mom, but I'm joyful. It's like joyful for me, because I chose it. And to me, it's not slow living in the sense that like I'm not, homesteading on our farm that we had up in the mountains and like whatever. It's vastly different. I live in a city. I go to school, I work, etc. But the magic is in the mundane and my life is full. And that to me is slow living.
That's so awesome. I love that so much.
I love that. Oh, it's like the sacred in the ordinary.
Absolutely.
So Sharon, what does the good dirt mean to you?
I mean, I think it goes back to what I said. Like if you're not nourishing your soil with joy, then the dirt's not good. Like I really like being in a place where I didn't even remember what brought me joy and actually questioning like, did the things that brought me joy in my younger years, was it actually joy or was it just fun? Because there can be a difference. And I think that in the last 2 years, I've really, really dug in. I mean, that's why my Instagram account is called Sharon Shares Joy, because I was like, what brings me joy? I don't even know. I don't even know anymore. And now I do, and it is what is nourishing the soil of my slow living. It's like, it's the magic that is in the mundane. It is like filling my life with things that I care about. And to me, that's what the good dirt is.
So lovely. So speaking of your Instagram and the projects that you're currently working on, where can people find more of you? And if they are interested in working with you, is that something that you are still doing?
Yeah. Okay. So my website is sharonbailey.co and Sharon Bailey Co is my business name. And at this point until the fall semester, once I start my fall semester of this year, I'm going to be pretty full. But right now, I'm still doing my process where I am taking on clients, and that always starts with a 90-minute gift session to healers. There's no obligation to hire me too. And so it's my gift back to the healing community is a 90-minute business coaching call. We start there. I have a pretty high conversion rate because I enjoy what I do, but that is something that people can do. All that information is listed on my website, so people can go there. I'm also doing like concierge business services for healers who just need business systems put into place. That's also on my website. People can go check that out. I primarily hang out on Instagram, up in my Instagram stories. I'm going to start posting more in my feed, just things I learned for the week, because I think that that's a fun way to share life. But I post very frequently in my Instagram stories and have lots of conversations with people up there. So that's basically it. I do have a crazy TikTok account. Just my TikTok blew up one year, like in like 2 months, and I got like 13,000 TikTok followers, but I recently got locked out. So it's there. It's also Sharon Shares Joy, but I'm not on it. So I can't get TikTok to let me back in. So
Gosh, that's annoying.
I know.
What did you do?
Yeah.
I don't even know. I was inactive. I think. I have no idea. So I'm just like, okay, well, whatever. I guess I'm not meant to be. It's like, I don't even know if I want to be there. Like, that's not really where I'm trying to serve people. So, but I am going to start this email list, which I'll have it probably up on my website by the time this launches, for stuff I learned this week. If people want to hear what's interesting to me, it is really like stuff I'm learning in school. Also what it's like to go back to school, to start a second career, what it's like to be the age of most of my professors who are also divorced, and how awkward that is.
That's awesome. In a room with a bunch of 20-year-olds.
Yeah. So anyway, there's probably going to be some interesting anecdotes. I think I'm going to just make it a place where I just share funny things that happen in my life and things that I find interesting. So that's how people can connect with me.
That's so fun. And this is a very specific random question, personal for me, but you shared on your Instagram a while ago, and I meant to like save it or go to it, but I didn't, because I just joined. There's a new gym in our neighborhood that opened up, and I really want to do more strength training, but I'm the kind of person who goes to the gym and I don't know what to do. And you had shared some person that you follow that tells you exactly what to do at the gym. Who is it?
Natasha Ocean.
Okay.
Oh, she's great. Anytime people are like, I don't know what to do in the gym. One of my girlfriends said this on a podcast once. She's like, when I go back to the gym, I feel like a baby giraffe, just like awkward, stumbling,
looking around.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like her programs eliminate baby giraffe syndrome in the gym. So like you can, and I'm not affiliated with her, but if I was, I would 100% like still be preaching, I would definitely be preaching the good name. But I love her programs. She's extremely science-based in how she creates them. She also has a really great YouTube channel where I think she does a great job. And I'm not really a YouTube channel person, but she breaks down stuff in such a tangible, informative way that I just find her information is great. But her programs are great. You just buy it once, and it's like 8 or 12 weeks. And each week has, different focus for the days. There's rest days. There's videos for each one. There's reps. There's information. There's all kinds of stuff. So I have used 3 of her programs. I think they're all fantastic, and they're like $60, and then that's it. A lot of trainers online, you have to pay for a subscription, and it's like, I just want to buy it and use it until I'm done using it. And then I actually go back and forth between her Build program, which is just pretty traditional strength training, and her Move program, which is a lot more like functioning, a little high intensity, strength training. It's kind of a mix of everything. And I'll usually do one for 3 months and then switch to the other and then go back and forth, or just mix and match. So
gosh, we love a good recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Listeners, her Instagram is full of them. So
I do like to share.
Let me know if you know of somebody that's, especially good in the field of bone loss or bone building.
Well, so I've recently been listening to, there's this doctor, her name is Dr. Marie Claire. It's her Instagram account. And she works with perimenopause and menopausal women, but she talks a lot about like protein focused for like, I feel like after you have a baby, there's postpartum is the term that kind of like, encompasses everything. I feel like there needs to be, I guess menopause is that, but like, I feel like there needs to be a better word to encompass like that part of our lives,
Yes, because like people think of menopause as the event, the hot flashes and the mood swings and blah, blah, blah. But there's decades after that.
Yeah. Well, and it's like menopause is the day that it happens where you go without having a period for, exactly, for a whole year. That's menopause. And then after that, it's postmenopause. Postmenopause doesn't really have the ring to it that I want.
Yeah. And it also seems like it's just after it's done and then it's done. And it's like, it's an active thing.
There are a lot of kind of terms out there for it. The third chapter I've heard, the wisdom years. All those things are kind of less than linear, I guess, or concrete or whatever the word is. They're sort of maybe more towards the woo-woo kind of terms.
It's more about experiential as opposed to like what's happening.
Exactly.
It's like, what's life like now that I only have one form of estrogen or whatever, like how is that impacting me? All you're going to give me is post-menopause? Like,
yeah. And you have to worry about your skeletal structure and
all kinds of stuff.
So anyway, before we close, this is your opportunity to leave the audience with whatever you'd like to leave the audience with, or talk about, anything that feel like we didn't cover.
I want to encourage people to connect with me. I feel like the social media world is really weird, but I definitely love engaging with people who find me on social media. And I find I actually make real sweet connections there. I mean, that's how I met y'all. And here we are, And so I really I do want to encourage people to reach out. I think if you're a healer and you are ooh, maybe I need some help. What I find is that people prioritize themselves last, and so healer or not, just in general, prioritize yourself more, because that's how you get to know more about what your body is telling you. It's how you get to know more about yourself. It's how you get to, it's how you take in information on yourself, prioritize yourself more. It's really okay. But yeah, if you are a healer and you're really wanting to not even really, you're thinking there's this little voice inside of you that's saying maybe me, then that's yes, you. So connect with me. But really, I just want to say, I love the work you ladies are doing. I'm glad you're still out here just preaching the good word about the good dirt and interviewing such amazing people and building your community. And I just want to tell you to just keep up the good work, keep it going. And thank you for having me on here again. This has been such a treat.
Yes. Thank you. It's so fun to
Thank you for coming back and circling back and reconnecting. And it's just wonderful. And just really enjoyed catching up with you today.
Likewise. Yay.
Yay. Thank you for tuning in, calling in, and spreading the good dirt. We love hearing from you. You can reach our listener voicemail at 443-459-1950. That's 443-459-1950. You can find this number in our show notes and in our Instagram profile.
This show is produced by Lady Farmer, a slow living lifestyle community, and the original music is composed and performed by John Kingsley.
For more from Lady Farmer, follow us on Instagram at WeAreLadyFarmer. That's WeAreLadyFarmer. Or join us online at www.ladyfarmer.com. We'll see you next time on The Good Dirt.
Goodbye.